Right. Okay, I've got share screen. Here we go. So we've got embedding EGL in education. These korero are all about us learning together as a community what enabling good lives in education might mean. But firstly, we want to talk a little bit about what is enabling good lives. So enabling good lives is a social movement that was led by disabled people and whānau in Aotearoa. And it was in response to a lot of the things that weren't working for them in the disability system, as well as in the communities and across sectors. So it was a response from the community, from disabled people and families to change things along and shift the power so that instead of services, organizations, governments hold the power is held by the people, disabled people and their families, and they decide how to utilize the supports and what supports they even need to really get on with building a good life. So the EGL approach can be actually used by each of us as a relationship building and an equity framework. So it doesn't matter whether you're a parent, a disabled person, a professional, an educator, it doesn't matter what space you're in, you can actually use the EGL framework, the principles, the approach to shift the way you work, interact, engage with disabled children, people and families, and really make some change happen. So the value of EGL, as I mentioned, it was led by disabled people and families. It prescribes to the social model of disability, which is really fantastic because it takes away from the individual deficit-based sort of perspective of disabled people. So social model of disability states that disability lies within the barriers that society puts forth in the way of disabled people, children, and their families, rather than being inherent in the disability itself. Enabling good lives is all about mana, self-determination, and voice for the individual. And how do we create opportunities for those to flourish and come through? It is aligned with whānau ora approach, and it also aligns with all the rights, disability rights, as stated in the UNCRPD, the UN Convention on the Rights of People with Disabilities. And finally, it upholds Tiriti or Waitangi and the UNDRIP standards, which is the UN Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous People. So it's a really, really holistic approach, as you can see, and it is something that we can apply in our lives across sectors, across communities to really start enriching and improving the participation, social inclusion, social cohesion for our disabled people, children, and their families. So the vision of EGL is really clear. It's all about disabled children and adults and their families having greater choice and control over their supports and lives, and making more use of natural and universally available support. So this is really important. It's not just about disability supports and services or specialist disability supports and services. It is about making sure that the natural day-to-day sort of support spaces that are available to everybody are also available to our disabled children, people and their families. And the universal level of support needs to be really, really improved. There's a whole, lot around universal design that needs to shift so that places, things, processes, services, supports become more inclusive for everybody. The EGL vision and education. So EGL is a framework that can be applied everywhere across communities, sectors, all spaces in the education space. This is what our korero is about today. In the education space, what does EGL mean? And how does that vision of the enabling good lives approach translate in the education space? So it talks about choice and control, and choice is about having those opportunities, flexibility, agency for our children, students, whānau, and them being able to choose and control how they access supports, what supports they access, what is important to them, what's a priority. Often we have children with multiple needs, where parents have said, oh, this is what we want to focus on, but the school wants to focus on something else. And so this is where how do we make sure that our individual families, children, disabled people have that choice and control over how they access supports, what supports they access, how they use the supports, all of it. Person-centered supports is another key concept, and this is all about are the supports tailored to you, or are you expected to fit into a specific, tick box or a list of supports and services that you have to pick and choose from. So this is all about the personalized adaptation and accommodations that are offered in the curriculum space, the learning space. Is the learning adapted to make sure our children can access depending on their learning needs. The other bit is that it is more than just about supports. It's about life. It's about the quality of life. It's about really coming from that strengths-based approach, looking at the abilities, skills, strengths that our children can bring to the table, and how do we really extend all of that, not only in the education space, but across their lives. So at home, in the community, how do we support them to have opportunities, eventually to participate in the community, work, volunteer, sort of, in different spaces that matter to them, all of that. The next little bit is about natural supports and what do natural supports mean in the education space. And, I've talked to other disabled youth people, and they've often talked about how those basic friendships in the classroom, peer relationships, being invited to, birthday parties, being invited for a sleepover, all of these things are so important. And then these opportunities actually allow for that natural support system to be built up, where when you need something, you don't have to have a teacher aide or a specialist to do something for you. You have a friend supporting you and making things easier for you. So you need less of those, specialist supports. It's about, in the wider context, not only in the classroom, but in the playground, what's happening. Are kids supporting you to play, to get involved in, lunchtime activities and games that are happening? So all of that really comes under that natural support space. And then ultimately we talked about the universally available support. So this is about really upping the game across the classroom, across the school, and making sure that there's universal design for learning. That the learning itself, the resources itself are all right from the start, really inclusive. They look at how do we include and support all our children's learning, rather than going, we need a specialist to come in and do this or that. So specialists definitely have a space, and this is where, the specialists come in that person-centered support space to provide that specialist support, but universally available support should also be put in place. And I think personally, our education system could do better with the universal level of supports that they provide. I think I will just end on this little note around the EGL principles. We've got the 8 EGL principles, which are self-determination, all about the individual's choice and agency to decide what is required for them and how those supports are used. In the education space, beginning early, it's about accessing supports, not just at the right age, but at the right stage. Doesn't matter when you are, what age the child is. If something new is needed, if something different is needed, then it should be accessible as soon as possible. Then we've got the person-centered support. As I mentioned, this is all about the specialist, individualized, targeted, and tailored supports that the child needs, and how easily, how well can they access it. Ordinary life outcomes, this is a huge one. Often parents talk about these things where they say, my child goes to school, they're at a mainstream school, they're, there, but they don't have any friends. And lunchtime, they don't have anything to do, or they don't really get invited to other things. And these are the little ordinary life outcomes that really impact the quality of life, the connections, the relationships our children can build. So again, really important that this is something we think about when we are supporting our children in education spaces. It's not just about the curriculum and the learning, academic learning, so to speak. Mainstream first. Now, mainstream first principle sometimes can be controversial, but what all it means is it means that mainstream supports and services should be available to every disabled person, first and foremost. They absolutely do have the choice of going for those specialists and person-centered supports and services. That's their right, and they should. But mainstream should be available if that's what they choose to do. So in the education space, of course, it refers to mainstream schools. However, in the wider sense of mainstream first, it means that you should be able to access your community spaces, your shopping spaces, your libraries, your other supports and services should be inclusive and accessible to all our disabled children, people, and families. Mana enhancing. Mana enhancing is all about bringing forth the strengths of our children. Really, really making sure that we use a strengths-based approach. We value them for their inherent, gifts that they bring to the table, and how do we help them, support them to showcase them and to be valued for them. Next one is easy to use. Easy to use as it says, easy to use, simple, and really, really, how do you make things easier and more accessible to our disabled children and people, right? Could be with regards to communication, could be with regards to physical access, could be regards to processes and procedures, whatever it is, it needs to be easy to use for children and families. And relationship building. Relationship building is really, really important. Again, as I've mentioned before, connections, relationships are the cornerstone of a good, quality life. And so they are absolutely critical. Now, relationship building could be with professionals, with agencies, organizations, them actually valuing how our children, how our families, or how our disabled people are engaged with, interacted with, really connecting with them, listening to them, responding to them, and being responsive to them. But it also means that our disabled children, families should have the opportunities to build relationships with the wider community, and those opportunities to create those relationships are super important, and they impact on the life outcomes for our children. So again, in the school setting, how is this being done? How is relationship building being nurtured? How are partnerships between school and home being formed, between EC and home formed? Or when it comes to services, how do you have that partnership, a respectful, collaborative, mana-enhancing relationship with the service or agency? So that's just the end of our little bit around the EGL principles and the overview. And what I'm going to do now is to hand over to our guest, Rebekah Corlett. Rebekah is a fabulous mom to 2 kids from Kapiti Coast. And she's been a friend of mine for a long time now. And we actually became friends because of all the work we do together in terms of advocacy for inclusion and equity. So Rebekah's journey has been, I think, a little different from mine, Rebekah. I had my son start out with special school and then move into mainstream school, then again into special school. And your journey has been different. You started out at special school and now moved into mainstream school, and you managed to retain it over there, and have some really good outcomes for your daughter. So look, I will hand over to you, first of all, so you can introduce yourself and your family in the way you see best. And then we'll do a little bit of korero. I can ask you some questions around, your journey and your thoughts about EGL. So one of the things I really think will be valuable for today is, we were just talking before, Rebekah and I were talking about how Rebekah feels she's not an expert in EGL. And I said, you don't have to be. It's about the journey of understanding. It's about the journey of, how and where EGL can be used to strengthen our, pathways towards inclusion for our children and our advocacy for inclusion. So it's not about being an expert. It's about where and how can you utilize, the EGL principles, the EGL approach to strengthen inclusion for our children. So on to you, Rebekah. If you would like to introduce yourself and your lovely family, that'll be awesome. Welcome, and thank you for stepping up to come and share your journey with us. Really appreciate it.
Thank you. Thanks, Brian. Kia ora koutou. Ko Hekurangi te maunga, ko Waiapu te awa, ko Ngāti Parau te iwi, ko Rongohaere te marae, ko Rebekah Corlett, tuku ingoa. So my ancestral home is on the East Coast, and I was born and raised in Lower Hutt. And I now live in the Kapiti Coast with my husband, Jason, and our two children, Sophia, who's 15, and Ryan, who is almost 12. Sophia was diagnosed as autistic at age 2.5, which is quite early, but she had no meaningful communication skills at that point. So it seemed that there was something a bit different with her. And she's non-speaking, and I use that language rather than non-verbal because she makes heaps of noise. And there are some words, we have some like, the other day she actually said bloody hell when we were in a rainstorm, and I'm putting that on my list. That's vocab. She's definitely she's got some words under her belt, but uses them sparingly. And when she was about 8, we went on the wait list for TalkLink for a piece of assistive technology, and she has an iPad mini with the touch chat communication app on it, which is what we call her big voice, because she's quite forceful in telling you exactly how she feels and what she wants when she uses her big voice with her device. So we were very fortunate to be able to access that, although it was a very long, drawn out process. Years 1 through 8, we're at a special school satellite class, and by year 8, she had outgrown those natural supports, I guess. She had outgrown the 4 walls of that classroom well and truly, and we knew that she was ready to explore, find out who she is and what she's capable of. So it was after a bit of a confrontation in an IEP with the principal, who, when I asked, can we have some more opportunities for inclusion in the mainstream, they said, well, you'll need to get her to stop doing all that noise and moving and stuff. And I thought, no, that is who Sophia is, and kids and teachers don't actually mind that. She's a part of this community, and she will take her place in the classroom alongside her peers. So that afternoon, I went and got the forms and enrolled her for the mainstream. college. So yeah, she's year 11, just started year 11. Year 9 was a breeze. She was just like fireworks going off in the sky, just trying all these different things. We found out she loves sewing and cooking, and yeah, she really loves Māori. She loves hanging out at the school marae, and yeah, she's part of that school community well and truly. Year 10, not so much, because she was expected to do a bit more work and not so much day trips and that sort of thing. But yeah, this year we're hoping for a bit of a gradual ease into the year and a bit of 50-50 fun and learning. So yeah, that's how we are where we are right now.
That's awesome, Rebekah. Rebekah, tell me a little bit about, as a parent, what was it that you noticed, or how did you actually come to notice, what Sophia wanted? Because self-determination is a big thing, and I always think when our kids are little, as parents, we just do everything for them, and we do the best, that we think is the best for them. But there might be things that they want to do, which is actually quite different from, what we want. One of the examples is when my kids were younger, I know I used to think, well, in order to get them out in the community, they need to do after school stuff, and, we join them up for lots of after school stuff. And somewhere down the track, I realized actually my kids aren't enjoying it. They don't like it. And, why am I making them do something that they don't enjoy? And so I really started then consciously looking at, okay, what do they enjoy? How do I find out even what do they enjoy? Because my son, doesn't speak at all. And even with his communication device, he has a communication device. He's 19 now, and he's only just starting to really use it well. So he uses it for food. He tells me he wants to go to the mall. He tells me he wants to go to Whitcool's or, warehouse. And I think early on as a parent, I didn't do such a good job of really creating opportunities to hear him, And so I'm really curious, how did you do that with Sophia? How did you start listening to her voice? How did you create opportunities for her to share her voice and, for you to be able to understand and acknowledge it?
I think that's just like a natural thing for us parents to just innately know what our kids want and do it for them without them having to use their language sometimes, especially when communication is a challenge. So once she got her AAC device and was using it on a more regular basis, I noticed she was a bit more defiant. She wasn't so like yes to everything. Like she'd say, no, I don't want to go there. So I think it's at the point when me and family and people around her realized, oh, she's got something to say. We didn't just think, oh, she's in another, in her own little world. You actually see the person and listen to their voice, and taking that voice out into the community. So it's not just something you do in class time or at home in the lounge. You take it with you and you show people around, this is my voice. I can say what I want. You don't have to preempt or give me everything right now. I can tell you what I want. Yeah. So it's about honoring, like valuing the voice, whatever form it comes in.
That's fabulous. Tell me a little bit about, along your journey, we talk about the EGL principle of mana enhancing. Can you tell me what in your journey was mana enhancing? A few examples, and what was not mana enhancing?
Yeah. So that's
what does it look like in school setting, what does mana enhancing mean for you guys?
that's the principle of EGL that I've struggled with the most, because just trying to see what the words mean and how it's actually open to interpretation. I've struggled with. I've loved it, and then I've hated it, and then got back to loving it, and then somewhere in the middle. The example that I wrote down when I was thinking about this is like my dream, selfishly, my dream for Sophia is that she would be able to use her AAC voice to recite her pepeha, because that's quite a central part of being Māori, and being able to introduce herself and who she is and where she's from and how it all comes together. And the technology is not there currently to correctly pronounce Te Reo Māori on an AAC device. So we had to be creative. And the example I had is that we don't have access to a speech therapist through Ministry of Education, shock horror. But school was open to us bringing in a speech language therapist that we knew, who was really knowledgeable about AAC, to work with Sophia and another student who had similar communication needs, and for a teacher aide to sit in and observe, and for it to become like an actual moment where everybody's learning, and so that it can be shared within the classroom. So the kids in the class were exposed to, seeing how AAC worked. The teachers were able to share that knowledge with each other so that they could communicate with Sophia. And since then, they go out, Sophia and her classmate and the SLT go out into the community, and they'll go to the local village and order sushi with their talker. And they're getting to be known in the little village that we live in, and it's raising that awareness around what a voice can look like as well.
That's really neat. And what you've said is, to get to that process, to that stage where Sophia can have her voice and have that mana enhancing moment where she can actually go out into the community, do something on her own, with the support, but have her voice being heard. It's taken planning, organizing, effort, to get to that stage, isn't it? It doesn't just happen. And I think, go ahead.
I was just going to say, I went off that way when I was supposed to go back to the pepeha thing.
Yeah.
The goal one term was to have her pepeha on her talker, and because the technology wasn't there, what school facilitated was for one of Sophia's Te Reo classmates in her year to be the recorded voice on her talker, so that when she presses the button for her pepeha, it's not me, and it's not the speech language therapist, and it's not the synthetic voice that sounds like Siri. It's actually someone, it's one of her peers, and that was like really important, that it was like someone that's a peer alongside her, rather than somewhere on the outskirts.
Look, that is such a good example of the natural supports being people around you. I always think about natural supports in a way as if you're driving a car and a car breaks down, you don't start Googling mechanics and call up a mechanic first. Often it is, you call up a family member, a friend, somebody, hey, I'm stuck, I need help. That's your first go-to, rather than a mechanic, right? And then you call a professional in after you've made that call usually. That's how I've done it always. And that's what natural supports are. You know, it's like, hey, I need some help. Who can help? You know, how can you help? What can you do? Or, you know, this is what I need. Can you come step forward and help? And then you look at, you know, what else, you know, the specialists and in sort of the paid supports and things like that. So I really love that example. It's so clear, you know, about using the natural supports and thinking creatively, isn't it? Our funding and resourcing and systems aren't really set up well enough for inclusive education for realizing the full potential of our disabled and neurodivergent children. And so it's so important that we find ways, creative ways. We look to our community. We look to who else can support, where else they can support us.
And because we're not in a EGL region, we pay for that, the speech therapist to come and do that. But I mean, that's the goal of, you know, when it is available to us, that would be something that would be within a, you know, a personal budget.
Yes.
And more people would be able to make that, you know, happen for their children in education.
Mentioning personal budgets, you know, it's really interesting how right now, when there is funding, when there's certain, you know, funding available for education, whether it's ORS funding or something else, from what I hear from families is that they don't always have the opportunity to have a say in how that funding is used or where it's prioritized. And some schools are fabulous, and they will work in that partnership with schools, and they'll, you know, work together with parents and other school sort of, you know, team members to see how they utilize that funding to suit the, you know, needs of the child and include the child's voice, the family's voice. But some schools don't. In your experience, tell me a little bit about where and how have you had some opportunities for self-determination to use funding the way you see most appropriate? You know, has that been a possibility for you, or has it always been, you know, schools determining how they use funding allocated?
Yeah, I think because our background, you know, predominantly was with specialist school, it was all out of our realms of control. And since we've moved to mainstream, like anything is possible.
Oh,
it's like open book, like just having those conversations. Like, we've got an amazing teachers and staff who are just completely open. 9 out of 10 times the answer is yes, like without hesitation. And I think, like, for me, because I do bits and bobs here and there, you hear about these opportunities coming up for like professional development on neurodiversity or some sort of inclusive opportunity coming up, and I will just quite subtly go, oh, have you heard about this? And just leave it there for them to have a look at themselves, because I don't like overstepping unless I really have to. But yeah, I'm always on the lookout for things that might benefit the whole class. But the example I was thinking of was I saw that, you know, quite often sports teams or cultural groups do tours around schools and offer to do free workshops with kids. And I saw something where a local basketball team, their cheer squad, were offering workshops in schools. And I just went to a teacher, oh, have you seen this? And then ended up, they had an amazing dance session with the cheerleaders, and everyone loved it. And another opportunity that I saw was, what's it called? Chamber Music New Zealand do a day-long workshop, and because, you know, in mainstream we don't have access to music therapy, and we had so much of it in special school, and I know the benefits massively to have access to that. So I was like, oh, have you seen this? And yeah, they came to our school and had this amazing day-long workshop with the kids. Another opportunity for inclusion, because we had the kids from Sophia's class, we had all the teachers could go. They included a local satellite special school satellite class come along, and also some senior music students from the mainstream, all working together.
That's brilliant.
Oh, it was
absolutely fabulous.
Brilliant.
What you're talking to me, you know, sounds like the whole principle of mainstream first being utilized and embedded alongside, you know, that relationship building. It's about getting what's out there in the community, the mainstream spaces, and bringing it into the school, right? To make sure there's opportunities for inclusive participation. So it, you know, school-wide participation, including your own child, you know, who may participate slightly differently, but she's doing it alongside her peers. So this is really fabulous. And I must say, one of the things, what I'm hearing from you is a willingness from the school to try something new and different, a willingness from the school to do things differently, and a willingness from the school to take a risk in experimenting and exploring something new, right? And unfortunately for us personally, we've not always had those experiences. So we had those experiences, you know, some years in primary mainstream school when my oldest son was there, and later for the other two as well, but not when he moved to intermediate. And in intermediate, we had actually a really, really negative experience where basically things were done in a certain way only. And if you communicated differently, if you behaved differently, if you learned differently, you were not really wanted there. So sadly for us, personally, you know, day 2 of intermediate, I was asked if this was the right place for my son, because he didn't speak. He, you know, communicated very differently, you know, some gestures, eye contact, a few sort of, you know, words on the assistive technology device. So tell me, parents often say it's the luck of the draw, right? In terms of what you get and how inclusive they are and how willing they are to work with you as a family. Tell me, in your opinion, what do you think we as parents can be doing to try and shift attitudes and thinking in schools to become more inclusive? And then also, what do you think schools could be doing themselves to shift the way things are done and become more inclusive? What are your thoughts? How can parents contribute to that, you know, shift towards inclusion, and what actions do schools need to start taking to shift towards better inclusion and, you know, sort of really allowing that vision of the enabling good lives approach to come through, you know, better choice, control for our children, families, in the way they access and use supports, both natural, you know, universal and paid supports, all of them.
Crikey, that's a loaded question. I think the most basic answer I can give for families is just be present. Go. I know life is difficult for us and busy and exhausting, but don't hide away. Go. You're part of this community as well. Go to the school fair. Go to the school discos and join the PTA if you can bear it. Go go to the information evenings. That's a really good one. And then, you know, if it's about camp or some you know, opportunity that's coming up, like I don't know, we had one in our school, my son's school, the other day about you know, how they have the courses on keeping yourself safe for kids.
Yes.
And
Yes.
it was an information evening about that. And I thought, I might just go along and just like prod, like, what's in here for our, you know, our disabled and our neurodivergent kids, and how are you going to make sure that they're safe in the in the conversation and included and all that stuff. But I think that's really important, is to just don't hide away, just be present. And it doesn't mean like banging on the principal's door every day when you have a problem, but just just be there, and so that people think about inclusion. Like, oh, we're planning this, we're planning camp. How is Sophia going to, how can we make it so she can attend? Don't give them any excuse to exclude your child. That's it. Yeah.
And I think that makes a huge difference, Rebekah. I remember, gosh, the PTA. It was amazing.
Wow.
I used to think that the opportunities I've had through the PTA have been so fabulous, because even after my kids have left school, you know, primary school, I still have, you know, those families, parents often in touch, you know, on social media and stuff. And when we go out and about in the community and they spot my oldest son, they actually come up and go, hi, and how are you? And it was because of those informal conversations I could have with moms while doing the sausage sizzle, selling cupcakes at the disco and all of it, you know, they got to know and understand my kids really well. And I must say, when we hit rock bottom with the school and we were actually, you know, having to go through a Human Rights Commission mediation with the school because they weren't being supportive and inclusive enough, the courage to do that I got was from the community, because they had our backs. They said, you know, of course he, you know, deserves to be here. Of course he should be here. And, you know, the afi, the aroha we got from the community was really, really important for me, because it gave me the strength to carry on and stand up for, you know, my child's rights and, you know, for his inclusion at school back in the day. So it makes a huge difference. I absolutely agree. And I think it allows, I guess, also our kids to have that transition into adulthood, isn't it? Because you know the community knows you, you've had, you know, more opportunities to interact and engage with others in the community. So it's fabulous. Now, on to the last question. So what do you think schools could be doing better? What can schools start doing better to allow and to adopt a enabling good lives approach?
Just say yes, and don't think about the other bits later. You know, I think it's probably the easiest way to look at it. But I think use IEPs as an opportunity to for everyone to have a say, for everyone to contribute, and for our children's voice to be central. It's including them. It's not just about them. It's they've got to be included. Their voice must be like first and foremost in that conversation. But yeah, for IEPs or you know, parent-teacher meetings, if you don't get an IEP, an opportunity for parents to have a say, not just being spoken to, and an opportunity for school staff to be able to have, you know, to suggest ideas, like a brainstorming opportunity rather than like a lecture. And there always be strengths based, because we don't want to hear all the things that our kids can't do. And puts you at a starting point to, you know, set bigger goals than just, you know, like your normal school, you know, well, I will attend assembly or this sort of thing. We can be way more aspirational. I think I've got this saying from you, Freon, I've heard you say it a million times, but we can be way more aspirational when it comes to setting goals and IEPs, and looking way further outwards, like into the future, and what life outside of school can look like now and in the future. So who can we connect with in the community, and who are our allies, and you know, what can we all bring to the table?
Absolutely. Look, you're so right in that sense. It takes a community to raise our kids and to really make sure they have these opportunities for building a good life. So the community connections matter so much, so much. And like you said, you know, nudging along, offering, you know, the opportunities that are available to, you know, our schools, educators, the teams working with our kids is so crucial. And I think this is where the partnership comes in, isn't it? You're not going in sort of, you know, with a hammer saying this is what needs to be done and this is how you've got to do it, but you're actually supporting the team to start learning and understanding your child and start seeing them in a more positive way, and allow them to also start sort of dreaming big for your child, because you dream big for your child, but you've got to share that dream with others, isn't it? And if they don't dream, then they won't aspire to sort of have any of those really big goals for them out there. So look, thank you so much for the conversation today, Rebekah. Really, really appreciate it. I hope everybody's found it useful. What I am going to do now is I will stop the recording and then I'll just open it up to the floor. If anybody has any questions, comments to make, you're free to just chat. And yeah, and then we've got 10 minutes left, and after that I'll close us with a karakia. So I'm going to pause the recording now.